Welcome to Some Things Considered, the podcast where we are obsessed with story. We celebrate creativity and we talk to cool people to find out what makes them tick. I'm your host, Sean Murphy. I'm an author. I direct the Center for Story at Shenandoah University, and I run the nonprofit 1455 Lit Arts. For more about me and what I do, check out seanmurphy.net. Hey, welcome back to Some Things Considered. This is the podcast where we are obsessed with creativity. We love celebrating story and storytellers, and we love to find interesting people to find out what makes them tick. I'm Sean Murphy, your host. I run 1455, the literary nonprofit. I direct the Center for Story at Shenandoah University, and I write books. More about me at seanmurphy.net. But the thing that I enjoy most about the jobs I hold is giving me an opportunity to connect and talk with interesting people who are smarter and cooler than me and let them drop knowledge. I'm always proud of any guest I have the privilege of talking to, but I've been looking forward to this discussion for a while. Today's guest is Stephanie Shepard. Let me introduce her, and then I'll let her introduce herself as well. But Stephanie was convicted of conspiracy to distribute marijuana in 2010. As a first-time nonviolent offender, she was sentenced to 10 years in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. After serving 9 years, she was placed on federal probation for an additional 5 years. She now serves as Last Prisoner Project's Executive Director and sits on the organization's board of directors. She is adamantly advocating for restorative justice for those who have suffered, as she has, from the criminalization of cannabis. Stephanie, it's wonderful to welcome you to the podcast. I appreciate your willingness to chat. And as I was saying before we came on the air, you've got it all. You've got important things to talk about. You make a living talking about them. So I really am looking forward to hopefully being able to present knowledge you're about to drop for everyone that tunes in. But thanks for being here.
No, thank you for having me, Sean. I was super excited, huge fan of the pod. So happy to be here. You said it all. You kind of gave my background, what brought me to this space, and just a little bit about me and my story. When I was serving my time and I don't like to say nonviolent, I prefer to say victimless because one of the things they like to do is make you seem violent. And it could be any sort of way. And sometimes things happen to people in life that shouldn't be attributed to your cannabis crime. So I consider there to be no victims in my crime when I was distributing cannabis. And, it's over and done with now, so I can say it.
Yeah.
But what I was missing when I was doing my time was any outside influence, any outside help, anybody reaching out saying, like, we see you, we hear you, and we're coming for you. And that would have made a huge difference on how I spent my time in prison, how I felt doing my time in prison. I felt very forgotten. I felt very left behind as I sit and watch the news. And, around 2016, when legalization happened in California and things started to move forward, and I'm sitting there thinking, but what about me? Like, it's now no longer a crime now. Any day now, someone's going to come for me, I'm sure. And there was no organization out there helping people like me. So when I got out in 2019, I went to a fundraiser in San Francisco, and that's where I met the co-founders of Last Prisoner Project. It was their second fundraiser. And I saw this room full of people supporting cannabis prisoners and wanting to get involved and looking to help fund this really huge undertaking that this organization was taking a part of. And I said, sign me up. What can I do? Can I help? I was so angry to see so many dispensaries when I got home. It was shocking to see billboards advertising, cannabis delivery services. And here I am, fresh out, had served all these years in prison for the very same plant that they now have on a billboard. So that kind of sparked a fire in me. And so then I see, this organization saying, we want to do something about this and saying, come, be a part of it. And that was really a part of my healing for me, to be able to do what I do, which I'm so passionate about and would do for absolutely free. I volunteered with Last Prisoner Project for a year and a half before they said, your your story, your experience is too important for you to not be doing it as much as you can, as often as you can, on as many platforms as you can. So they found a way and they brought me on board, and that was 6 years ago. Um, I, I'm now, like you said, executive director, and that's a huge undertaking, but I feel like my experience is really going to just add to the work that we do.
How could it not, right? I mean, there's so many things, all of them amazing and positive, running through my mind as you speak, which is there. We talk about story, and I never want to be cute, but I mean, in this conversation, there are so many stories within your story, the organization story, and an American story of the historical kind of intersection between racism, the justice system, et cetera. And we can and will dive into some of those and take some chunks out of that. But talk a little bit about what exactly Last Prisoner Project does. I'll just say, when I found out about the organization, it was a wonderful feeling of like, what a great cause. But I did my own kind of like, that's something that's kind of slipped under my radar. And I'll confess, even as someone that has always seen the undeniable injustice of the way sentences were doled out, all of that. Once it was um, legalized, I think for understandable reasons, in some cases, it slipped off people's radars. And you were telling me right before we came on the air, like there are people that are still serving sentences, and it's like, how is that even possible? So maybe we can talk a little bit about the actual work the organization does, and how that manifests into we're literally taking one case at a time, but also speaking to a larger cause.
Absolutely. One of the things that I was grateful about was coming on early and being able to add my input to the already great work that they were doing. So we're a 501(c)(3). We do policy work, reentry work, record clearance, and obviously working with pro bono attorneys to file that paperwork. That's not easy to file, and especially if you have no knowledge of what it takes to get a successful petition filed. So being able to work with all these really great lawyers and matching them up with the right case to have the best outcome possible is really, really important. It's hard to pick what the actual root of our organization is because everything's important. The legal aspect is important, the policy work, which it helps a broad amount of people. It's not that one person at a time, like through the legal work. It covers a broad amount of things. So we worked with Governor Westmore in Maryland, and we had a campaign called the Pen to Write History. And the story of this pen was used to write letters by hundreds of impacted people. Those letters were then compiled into a book and sent off to the administration to let them know, like, these are the people that are hurting. It's not just the people incarcerated, it's also the families. And that's something that a lot of people don't consider. So we got this pen, and the idea was for then President Biden to use that pen and release the 3,000 people federally incarcerated. Like, let's start there. Let's not do any more of this one person, one person. Let's start with a broad amount of people, get them back reunited with their families, monitor them, see how they do, see how they move on in their lives. Recidivism is very low for cannabis prisoners. So we were looking forward to that. Well, that didn't happen, but we were able to work with Governor Westmore and have him utilize that pen to pardon 177,000 people in Maryland. And some of those were simple possessions and things like that, but it's a start. And I always think it has taken us so long, decades, to get
Yeah.
to this really messed up place of where cannabis is with legalization and criminalization, but it's one step at a time. And I always look at what that one step is and I celebrate that step, and then we're on to the next step. And eventually we're going to get there.
For sure. And when you talk, when I think about things like justice and the arc toward justice was just always has to be fought for, always has to be kind of gained instead of given. Your work in particular is so difficult because you're trying to impact the present and the future, but it almost requires, especially a younger generation, younger politicians, to remember or be made aware of the fact, as speaking as a Gen Xer, the trajectory of cannabis from when I was a kid to a college student to 10 years ago to 5 years ago is astonishing. It was when I was a kid, the propaganda, it was the gateway drug to horrible things. You were a loser if you smoked pot. Only certain types of people smoke pot, to the argument that it was safer than alcohol, to this is never going to be legalized. I mean, I remember, the campaigns when I was in college, like legalize it, Peter Tosh, right? Like, yeah, what a pipe dream. No, no
Yeah.
pun intended. The fact that it happened. So on one hand, like that's remarkable. And that shows that in American history, as bad as things seem, with enough awareness and activity, good things can happen. But what I really am stuck on talking to you is this idea that yes, we're making progress, work is being done and can be done. But what about these people that were caught in this kind of crossfire of cultural propaganda, a very racist system, and white people too, but speaking of my youth, I mean, we can go from Nancy Reagan and just say no to, Marion Barry being the mayor of DC. Like there was a very dark undercurrent of the way we talked about drug crimes. And we need to unpack all that before we can even kind of move forward. So I salute you guys have your work cut out for you as it relates to educating, but also inspiring.
Yes. I remember all of those. This is your brain on drugs and all of those things. And the one thing for me is I've never bought into the myth of cannabis. I grew up with older brothers. They kept the cigar box under the bed with the little seeds and the lighter and the Visine in it. And, I saw it, but it wasn't demonized as much, I feel like, even back then, as over the years they tried to make it seem. So we know disproportionately Black and brown people are sentenced much more harsh than you probably ever thought you would be as a young white man, just enjoying, a little joint here and there. Um, but now, even as I look back on my situation, I often have to wonder, if I were a blonde hair, blue eyed white woman sitting there, would I have just been given a 10-year sentence, mandatory minimum? So it could have been more. So I'm lucky that that's all I got. But I wonder, if I weren't a Black woman sitting there, if it would have been so easy to hand me, never been in trouble before. Definitely wouldn't have gotten in trouble again at that point. You know, I had my real estate license, I sold real estate in New York. So I could have been given an opportunity to not be incarcerated, but I that wasn't even a consideration. So we have to be honest first about A, no one should be incarcerated for cannabis, but B, no one should be incarcerated for life for $20 worth of cannabis. And it's no mystery that that sentence was given to a black man in Louisiana, Kevin
Yeah.
Allen. And
Yeah.
that is one of the stories that really nags at me because in what world would $20
Yep.
cost you your life?
Right.
We were lucky to work with Kevin and his lawyer and get Kevin a resentencing. And you know, when that happened, so many people were exuberant about that. Like, oh my God, resentencing. Okay, he's already been in there 10 years. Um, this is going to be great. But me and my experience, I knew the same people who gave him that first heinous sentence was going to be the same people who were going to resentence him. And they resentenced Kevin to 35 years.
Wow.
The best part about that was he was able to get possibility of parole with that downward departure. So Kevin will now be going in 2026 up for parole.
Okay.
So that's the next fight we have there to make sure that they understand this is a thing out here. Cannabis is a thing out here. He sold two dime bags.
Right.
He's done enough time, and 35 years is unacceptable.
Totally. And one of the things preparing for this conversation, there's so many, I mean, for anyone that considers himself progressive, this is like 101 type stuff. So it's like, how do we break it down to, real basic, real talk? And one cliche that happens to be, true is that in politics, in culture, one way to kind of disabuse someone of prejudice in every sense of the word is if it affects them or affects someone they know. And I think that's been part of, how there was backlash. It was the combination of awareness, like this is ridiculous to be handing out these kind of sentences for, something that's ultimately going to be legalized, but also it's something that if the narrative is there's a certain type of person that does this drug, it's easier to demonize and easier to use propaganda. When I see things like the opioid crisis, I've been hopeful that as horrific as that is, it's only further put into relief how innocuous cannabis is and who isn't impacted by the opioid crisis. Are those ways that we can move hearts and minds? Because I start to feel despair when I hear a story like you just told of the fact that the justice system, depending on what city and town and state it is, ultimately can be the arbiter, no matter what the nation says. There have to be ways that we can continue to fight that narrative.
And that's a wonderful reason to explain why we work on the federal level and the state level. It's almost easier to work with the state governors who can, can take that pen and can utilize it from here to whenever. Take the pen, utilize it, release the people in your state. Let's start there, especially some of these legal states.
Right.
Like, how do you have someone incarcerated for something that's legal in your state? Yeah, people can argue, well, they did it the wrong way. They did it without a license. Okay, there can be punishment for that, but the punishment has to fit the crime. And it just is so upsetting to me to think about so many people serving life sentences, 60 years, 40 years, for something that I can literally have delivered to my house because there's a dispensary across the street.
Right.
And
Well,
it gives you such a, a sometimes sadness, but much of my time is spent angry, to be totally
sure.
honest. And not for me. I did my time. I
Yep.
did what I did when I did it, and I was
Yep.
punished for it.
Right.
What doesn't need to happen is that punishment doesn't need to continue.
Right. Right.
If they're selling now cannabis drinks in, Target,
Right.
why is anyone missing out on time with their families, supporting their families? And
Yeah.
that is shown through the constituents. We've had a hand in over 75 constituents being reunited with their families. And that, in the grand scheme of things, is just a drop. And
Right.
it's taken so much work just for those one person at a time, one person at a time to
Yeah.
bring those people home. Um, there is one story that I'm so super proud of, and that is the story of Deshaun Durham. And Deshaun Durham was a young kid, 20 years old, got a cannabis charge for like a pound or two, and was given 8 years in state prison. And we worked with the governor there in Kansas, and Deshaun came home in December. So saving Deshaun 5 years, that
Yeah.
makes it worth it. But if it can work for Deshaun and it can
Right.
work for Richard DeLisi, who served 32 years in prison for weed and
Right.
now has a thriving cannabis brand, Delicioso.
Yep.
Um, the same premise that got those people home and that is applied to them should be applied to everyone, or at least given the opportunity for everyone to get out and show, like, okay, I've learned my lesson.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to move on with my life, raise my kids. It's very heartbreaking to see the amount of fathers and mothers incarcerated.
Sure.
So part of what we do, besides the policy work and the legal work, is we've always had a reentry program. And through that program, we've been able to give out $33.7 million directly back through grants, through commissary funding, family grants. It was something that at the time we're like, okay, we're working on the policy change. We're working with lawyers to help get you directly home, but what else can we do?
Yeah.
And unfortunately now, you know, 2025's industry is not 2020's industry. Um,
Mhm.
so a lot of brands that we've always worked with, that we've had as partners and supporters, they just don't have it like that anymore. And when something like that happens, you have to learn to adjust and shift your programs. But one thing that we're not shifting is that portion of our mission, which is to bring you home. So love that we have been able to give impacted people. Me, myself, when I got home, I
Yep.
received a grant. I drive the car I drive today
Yeah.
because of that grant. So
Yeah.
it's really important that we find every way to help. We also have a letter writing program, and it's a small thing that people think is not that big of a deal. Oh, what's a letter going to do?
Yeah.
Well, people who say that have never, spent years in prison.
Right.
Um, the first year you are in prison, yeah, first couple of years, you still have support, people writing you, putting money on your account.
Yeah.
As time goes on, that falls off. So I'm so proud of the thousands of letters that we've been able to get back into prisons and have those prisoners, when they get out, have that stack of letters with them. And
Yeah.
we have a digitalized program so people can go on their cell phones, their laptops, put out a letter real quick. I send it snail mail. And, I kind of peruse it just to make sure there's nothing weird going on because some people think the letter writing program is like a dating site or something. I don't know. But so I try to save our constituents from any weirdness, but I literally will cry sometimes when I read these people actually reaching in to a total stranger, asking what they like to do, telling them about their lives, giving them hope. And
Yeah.
I've had constituents say it's the hope that we know that there's someone out there at least rooting for us, fighting for us, doing things to uh, hopefully get us home one day. And that's a huge thing for me. So I always say it's one of my favorite programs because prison is lonely. And it's nice to know that we know you're there, but we're fighting for you. And here's how. So I love those letters.
Oh, that's so great. And where my mind goes is immediately into like, strategery, like, someone that can try to galvanize a writing community. One of the things I've been saying, for a long time to people is you don't have to start a nonprofit. You don't have to, you don't have to march in the streets, but what the forces, whomever they are, the powerful people, what they want more than anything else, yes, they want money. Yes, they want power. What they want is apathy so they can continue to do their dirt without people interfering. And so what I tell people when they get despondent is you can make a tremendous difference even if just every day you do something like decide to write a letter, get involved with an organization that's doing good work because that those incremental acts of goodness become snowballs that become boulders and that works. So I want to like recognize that and put light on that and tell you how much that means to me personally. But where I also go, because we can circle back on the redemptive power of story and books and letter
Yeah.
writing and the humanity that's always going to save us. But I'm curious to ask you, like, what are some of the barriers of resistance when in 2025, when you're in front of politicians? I mean, we can just say it, right? There's going to be racism, there's going to be political cowardice and expedience, but what are some ways that the broader community might be able to help that work when it gets to the point of what are some of what's some of the pushback from say a governor or a court system that's like, yeah, we hear you and we hear that it's legal now, but we're still not going to change. Like, how do we change that?
There's a couple of things with the pushback. I think one is, but we're supposed to be tough on crime. Um,
Yeah,
it's not going to bode well with our constituents if we're letting criminals out. But what statistics show is about 72% of Americans don't want people incarcerated for cannabis.
right.
It's one of the very few things that both sides of the aisle can agree with. So, um, I don't understand that when those numbers are out there, the polls are out there, they can poll their own constituents and ask them how they feel about, do you think people should be incarcerated for cannabis when it's a multi-billion dollar industry?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a easy, I feel like it's very low hanging fruit. And when I started doing this work, I was like, oh, well, clearly I'm going to get out there. I'm going to explain my experience to them, put a face to what this looks like, put a voice to what this looks like, and they're going to see the error of their ways. And then I'll move on
Yeah.
to prison reform or whatever else, now
Yeah.
I'm into.
Yeah.
And here we are 6 years later
Right.
still trying to convince someone that a cannabis prisoner, although prisoner is attached to it, are individuals. No
Yes.
two people are the same. I thought any candidate would want to grasp onto that. Like, this is a win for any politician.
Yeah.
You're going to be held up on shoulders in a large population
Yep.
if you just take these steps and get these people home. And so it's one of those things I just have a hard time standing in front of these people and
Yep.
trying to explain this to them when I know they're smart. They understand.
Yep.
But what a lot of people don't consider is that prison is a business and it's a
Yep.
big business. And taking tens of thousands of people out of the system and putting them back into control of their own lives, supporting their own families, is something they don't want to do because now there's a lot of things that are affected when the population, the prison population goes down.
Yep.
And that's everything from contracts, government contracts. In federal prison, there's a program called the Unicor program. And Unicor is one of the higher paying jobs, uh, and they get you in this sweatshop environment and you're making shorts for the Navy, you're making parachutes, you're making cups, you're making all these things that I am so curious to see what those contracts look like.
Yep.
What are those
Yep.
contracts worth?
Yep.
And so it comes down to money. I mean, forget about what the taxpayers are paying. Like that's a drop in the bucket, 40,000 to 60,000 per inmate. That's a drop in the bucket to what these uh, contracts, outside
Sure.
contracts, are really
Yeah.
worth. So there's that. You know, all businesses want repeat business. I was even told by an officer in Phoenix, when I was in Phoenix, you'll be back.
Sure. Yeah.
You hope I'll be back so you can keep your job, but you don't know me. I told them, I won't be back. And when I do come back, I'm taking prisoners out. I'm not coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. Again, like I feel like a conversation that would occur on this level would just be repeatedly and understandably saying, but we need to tell more stories and we need to, but you're proving that, you were, disabused of the very understandable assumption that you're being able to tell your story would move some hearts and minds. But we're seeing when money's involved, when political expediency is involved, it's much more difficult. It to me, the onus goes back on the citizens, and getting them to understand these are people that are, never mind the injustice. These are tax paying citizens that we're depriving from sharing the burden to keep our roads better, to keep our streets safer, etc. All the things that tax dollars do. It occurs to me that if the rest of us can tell better narratives and not just rely on people like you and organizations like Last Prisoner Project, there has to be a groundswell that makes politicians react or shows them, with data, you can do these things and there won't be blowback. There's always going to be the what 5 to 20% of incurable bigots or, just hardcore partisans, but you move the needle by getting people to speak out. So again, to me, it feels like the onus comes back on the artistic community to put some of this energy into making sure that we're giving space so that this narrative, arc toward justice is more powerful.
And I'll tell you, Sean, one of the things that I notice is there's so much coming at people every day.
Sure.
Like every time you turn on the news, there's something else unbelievable happening. So you can imagine how hard it is for me to constantly be trying to keep this top of conversation, trying to keep this as a priority because it is a priority. It's not 5 or 10 people. These are
Right.
tens of thousands of Americans
Yeah.
who were doing the same thing on a much smaller level than any of these large multi-state operators in this space, or like it it's very difficult to get them to understand when you know they already understand.
Yeah.
But it even goes so much deeper than just taking somebody out of society for X amount of years.
Yeah.
Now you have, um, upon reentry, you have a whole different set of hurdles that you have to jump.
Mhm.
And that could cause to violation and you going back. So it's voter suppression. In many places, if you're a felon, you can't even register to vote.
Yep.
Thankfully, I live in California. That was one of the first things that I asked my probation officer was, can I vote? She didn't
Yep.
even know. I had to do my own research, take it back to her, and she was like, well, okay, I guess so.
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
well, this has got to be an email or something because people
Right.
have been arrested not knowing their status of if they could or couldn't registered, and now they're facing years in prison again, just for
Right.
trying to exercise what really is our right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Let me.
they take all these layers as you peel them back. Then you have voter suppression. Now you have housing insecurity.
Sure.
Um, that's one of the first things on a lease agreement for any, apartment is have you been convicted of a felony?
Hmm.
And now you have to go into that. Some, have you ever been uh, convicted of a controlled possession of a controlled substance?
Right.
Now they're making you out to be something that you're not just
Yeah.
by marking that box. Now you have to decide, do I tell the truth
Right.
and risk not getting a roof over my head?
Yeah.
Or do I lie and now I'm in risk of being found out?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so what I often tell people is it doesn't matter what you do,
Hmm.
it's that you do. Like, do something.
Yes.
And it could be something as small as writing a letter. Pick on Fridays, I make calls to representatives just to ask what their position is,
Hmm.
to remind them. So some people, their staff know me. Like as soon as I call, they're like, "Hey, Stephanie, what's going on?" I'm like, "Just calling to find out if there's been any change on the stance for, releasing cannabis prisoners at all." And I go into my spiel. They say, "Okay," but just doing something makes me feel like, okay,
Yeah.
I've extended that olive branch. And it's not about blaming. Like
Right.
we can all do the right thing today. And that's what I tell the representatives. You all have an opportunity to push this, to convince and Republican and Democrat alike.
Sure.
Laughter Project, we are nonpartisan,
Yeah.
or you can call us bipartisan or nonpartisan, either one, but we're going to take the help from whoever offers it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we just need them to know that it's a smart move on their part. And somebody, I'm waiting for the first smart person to accept that challenge and let a nice number of people out so they can see how we get back into society and are some of the best people you can have out there.
Right.
The
Right.
lessons you learn, the humility you learn, the appreciation you learn in prison
Mhm.
make you a phenomenal employee, a phenomenal neighbor.
Yeah.
So there's no danger. I just wish someone would take the chance and take the opportunity.
Well, that leads me to the big question, right? The big elephant in the room, which is I truly believe, the work that I do, when we were talking before we came on the air, like the power of story, the power of books, the power of the human contact, those impulses do change lives. They're capable of providing hope. So I'm convinced that part of the problem or part of the solution is the more of these stories that people read and hear and respond to will move hearts and minds, and that's good. It's gradual, right? And it's organic and gradual, but if you were to say to me, what are one or two or three things if you had your megaphone, if you could be on CNN or you could just, shout it out or just say to me, what are a couple of things people can and should do that they don't even realize they'd make a tremendous difference? You mentioned the letter writing, which I think is amazing. Calling representatives, hell yeah. But what else? Like, for me, so I can use this information to spread around so people feel like they can actually do something.
Um, I always tell people have these conversations. Have these conversations with the people close to you. Have these conversations with your representative. Let them know how you feel. Um, Another thing I always say is you just need to take that moment and reach out to people. Take that opportunity if it ever comes up, because when you do that, then people start thinking, now you're going to look at who you're going to vote for, you know? Then vote in that interest. Make that an important part of where do they stand on cannabis? Where do they stand on um, people being incarcerated for cannabis? And you
Sure.
have to let them know that that matters to you.
Yes.
And that's going to reflect in votes. And that's the ultimate pathway to power is through having the most votes. Well, if you want my vote, I'm going to need to know
Yeah.
what you think about people being incarcerated for cannabis. Not telling people to be a single issue voter, but making that an important part of the conversation, not just pushing it to the back. Um, but yeah, we try to do um, tangible things that people can do through our Take Action page. So people can go to our website and look at what feels right to them. Do you want to sign a petition? Do you want to let it be known? We have a Pardons to Progress campaign where you can go in, you put very little information, your name, your zip code. It'll automatically generate a letter to your governor. So we try to make it so easy because we know there's so much heavy stuff going on out there. Like
Yeah.
people don't need one more thing that they have to worry about. So we try to make it as easy as possible for people to actually get involved.
Yeah.
But really making your feelings known as a voting American is very important.
Sure. Sure. Have you found, and I mean, I think it's fair to say just about a year ago, we probably would have been having a slightly different conversation. I think the urgency, knowing what's going on sociopolitically, and kind of what I see certainly as like as a white male is a more unabashed proud racism and nativism. But what I guess I can't shake my own naivete in thinking that when things like that happen, at least the rot is being exposed and we know what we're dealing with. Like, so for instance, again, as a white man, I mean, for all the reasons, I was an enthusiastic Obama voter, but I think a lot of especially white people for understandable reasons thought, well, we've made a significant step forward that we'll never have to do again. And what is that's reminded me as like a fan and student of history is American, much less world history, is having to fight the same battles over and over again. So I try to take hope in the fact that rather than feel despair, because there's so much to despair about, that the fact that things are really tricky right now, that's the time to galvanize people. That's the time to get people that normally might be aloof to say, I can no longer ignore this. Um, and again, to me, it comes back to how do we start telling better narratives as citizens? The activists and the people like you and the writers and the politicians that feel inclined to make change are doing the best they can. But it's really on the vast majority of citizens that vote and have wallets and have friends and families. Any advice for how to begin to tell better narratives? Or what would you say to the artistic community? Like, hey, guys, do a little bit more of this.
Yeah. I will say, not looking at people as a monolith, not looking at cannabis prisoners or prisoners in general as you're just a number, you're just a prisoner. One great part about our letter writing program is when you go onto the page, you can read stories. You can actually see the faces of people who, and many of them in their own words, are telling you how they feel about this, what their life was like before. Doing their own bios is really important because that's not us telling you as an organization, oh, this is so and so, he did A, B, and C. No, no. They want their stories told. They want it out there. What I would have given to have my name spoken in some of the rooms that we speak people's names in, I would have given anything, but I didn't have that. So just having those conversations, everybody knows somebody who can maybe make something happen. You never know. So don't stop talking about it. Don't stop finding out, well, who is this guy, Kevin Allen? You know, we provide social media assets. You can repost things. There's so much reach that can come from one person sharing it with another. You think about the things that go viral, right? The
Yep.
dumbest of dumb.
Yeah.
I think if we could take that same energy to send our friend this funny video or this cute video of a kitten, what if we took this video of Mo Tahir or Parker Coleman or Caswell Sr., any of our constituents, and instead sent this, hey, did you know about this? Did you know this was going on? Like, let's reshare it. Let's make this an issue that can't be ignored.
That's right.
And it's hard to do when you're kind of in a vacuum of
Yep.
just we just talk about it with other people that agree with us.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not it. We need to talk to the people that don't agree. Find out, why don't you agree? Bring people around slowly at their own pace, make those points. But going to kind of how things are going back, like my father was born in 1919 in the Deep South. So you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I've always had civil rights in my life, and I've seen and heard what it takes to overcome that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen overnight, but if you keep chipping, you're going to get there. Now, another thing I'm seeing is the rollback of some of these things. Some of these legalized states are now trying to reverse those legalization for
Yeah.
cannabis areas. So don't let that happen.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it's something in me. I was born in, I'll tell my age, I was born in 1969. So the Civil Rights Act had already been passed,
Yeah.
but the anti civil rights crowd was still strong and fighting fiercely to
Yeah.
keep even what had been legalized. So I look at everything that we're going through now as sort of just another version of that. Um, but one thing people didn't do was give up. So you go from the bus boycotts to the sit-ins to, you know, civil action in the streets. All of those things are just what we need to do here in this cannabis space to get these people home. And it's not about cannabis, it's
Yeah.
about justice. A lot of people hear cannabis and instantly their brain shuts off.
Sure.
But it's really about just pure social justice, that Kevin Allen shouldn't be serving 35 years for two dime bags. I don't care if it was his third strike.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
other two were also victimless drug crimes.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, again, there's so many ways that, and I kind of spend my life kind of lamenting and trying to write about bad narrative and how, too many progressives have not seized on. Yeah, I think back to the crash in '08. We had people that wrecked the economy that didn't do a day in jail. It's like we could get upset about that and hyperventilate at the unfairness, and we have every right to do that, but we need to craft a narrative that gets people in certain areas of our country to understand there are white collar criminals who are impacting your lives and hurting the entire country, and you're putting all of your energy into victimless, nonviolent crimes. That's not happening for no reason. There are reasons. Think about who is profiting and who's at advantage by spreading those kind of myths. And it just what you just said, these unfortunately are battles that we have to just keep fighting and fighting. But when people are apathetic or checked out or don't vote, that's the worst case scenario. So I think on a basic level, obviously that's like the basic goal is make sure people are doing the bare minimum.
Yeah. And you know, the New York mayor race right now is being ran. There's a huge difference in between the three candidates. One candidate said, "Yes, I was actually just in a dispensary." Oh, what did you get there? He was like, "Legal cannabis." Okay,
Right.
now you have my attention. If I'm a New Yorker and this is something I care deeply about, now I need to see more from you. What else do we agree on?
Yeah.
Um, One person was like, no. You
Right.
can guess who that was. And one person was like, no. And the third person was like, well, I had a back injury once or whatever. It was for medicinal purposes. So that is the perfect three sections of what we're dealing with. The
Yes.
people who are like, well, medical, okay, but
Yeah.
not just for adult use. The one person who is like, no, I'm a never cannabis guy. And then you have the other person who's like, heck yeah, right on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as a voter, if I were voting in New York, I know where my vote would go because this is something that obviously you're open to. And we just need more of it. And this myth that cannabis is just for the liberals, or no, we have data that shows that the right and left use cannabis at the same rate.
Right.
I go to
Right.
an event that's full of Republicans, like great partners, full of
Yeah.
Republicans. They're
Yeah.
all out there smoking. They're
Yeah.
all out there making money from the cannabis space.
Yeah.
But
The libertarians were the ones that, again, going back to my roots and my college experience, it was the libertarians that were always leading the charge on legalizing. It wasn't the hippies. I mean, the hippies were talking about it, right? And I'm saying hippie facetiously, but it wasn't, say, the typical progressive guys that were on the front lines. It was people that were all about states' rights, individual rights. And to me, again, that's a very low-hanging fruit, making sure the say right-leaning, more libertarian are back united with the progressives in understanding that these are very connected issues. And if you poke at one thing, whether it's cannabis and a couple of other things like white collar financial crimes, the dots are pretty easy to connect. And I think that's how we break through with narrative to getting people to understand like this is a class issue. This is a money issue. This isn't a black and white issue. This isn't a drug issue. This is how are people being advantaged by still demonizing victimless crimes? There's a reason for that. It doesn't just happen.
yeah, we spoke a little bit about just the whole complex issue of prisons and how they work and different things. And there's a company that gives they provide commissary items.
Yeah.
So there'll be expensive items, like let's say coffee is like Folgers, and Folgers like $15.
Right.
Then there's this other company that comes in and they're like, we also have coffee and our coffee's only $8. And all of there's those two sides, the more expensive things, and obviously you're making very little money in there. So you're always going to go for the cheaper items made by this particular company. It would be very interesting to know who owns that company. How did you get those contracts?
Yeah.
And so there's just so many layers to it when you talk about why.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of money spent on commissary. I mean, you have to buy everything from your hygiene. People think prison is free,
Right.
and prison's not free. It's actually really expensive
Right.
for someone who's making 12 cents an hour, but your commissary is a 30% markup.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who's paying that? It's
Yeah.
not you. You're not hardly making any money, so that falls on your family.
Right. That's
And
right.
these are the stories and the discussions that when we do lobby in DC and we lobby it with states, that we let them know you're not just hurting one person.
That's right.
You're hurting communities and you're hurting families within those communities. And it's just not worth it. You would be so revered. I challenge any of your listeners, if any of them are politicians or any of them are governors or know a governor. My kid's cousin's uncle is a governor over in wherever.
Yep.
Have these conversations, and I challenge any one of them to
Yeah.
take an opportunity, take a step, take that pen and free a cannabis prisoner and see where your popularity goes.
Yep.
Just do one, do 10,
Yep.
and take that opportunity to grab that low hanging fruit.
That's right. So, well said, full agreement. Here, here. But I think what you're really getting at now, we're really peeling back, getting to the basic human issue, which is, I think, from my modest vantage point, what we're seeing so much of right now is the despair of people who see that the system doesn't work for them. That is absolutely cuts across the political aisle, and seeing things like what you're describing, a politician on either side having the courage to say, I am not content to see lives that could be purposeful and loving and profitable thrown away for nothing. People see more of that, they're going to be more positive. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to be active voters. So maybe that's also part of the narrative, getting politicians and connected people to understand it's in their own best interests to take an interest, and getting people that have decided to sit out and not vote or not get involved. This is a great entryway where, yes, it's all about the work you do and this particular cause. But as I think we've demonstrated in the last hour, once you look under that rock, you don't unsee all the other things you're about to discover, and that's where the real work I think can get done, because then people become advocates and bring people along with them.
Yeah, this was not my path. This was, I thought when I got out, I would just go back to my normal type of a life.
Sure.
But something like that, I looked under that rock. I lived under that rock. So getting out and seeing who was making the money versus who was really incarcerated on such a large scale, class and race wise. Uh, who has those connections to pull the string to get a pardon and who doesn't. And it shouldn't be about who knows who to get a pardon. It shouldn't be about what you can uh, provide for this pardon. It should be about this is the right thing to do. And it's such a relief off of our society. It would be such a relief instead of having a father incarcerated and the mother, a single mother at home trying to raise their children. Why not put them back together and assist them back into their reentry? that's better for everyone. It's better for the children. I go to visit constituents sometimes, and when I go into the visiting rooms and I see children there visiting their parent, it just makes my heart break because I know it doesn't have to be that way.
That's right.
Especially like with our constituents, like they shouldn't have to go and visit their parent in prison while walking down the street and actively passing dispensaries.
That's right.
Can you imagine how mind-blowing that is for a child? Wait, that's a dispensary, but my dad's in jail for cannabis? But that's a cannabis. So I really just encourage people to don't stop talking about it. Don't stop making it something that matters. You can care about all of these other things. Just put that in there. And we're going to keep chipping away at it.
Yeah, you are. Well, you can consider me an enthusiastic advocate. You've got my platform anytime you care to use it. As I said at the outset, selfishly, I enjoy learning and being inspired by amazing people. You're no exception, but this cuts a little deeper, and I feel, I thank you for sharing your story, talking about the work that this great organization does, but also for kind of reminding me that this isn't just a state of mind. This is the daily work, and every day we're all chipping away. Those of us that care to, and we should never feel smug about the work we're doing as good progressives. We need to bring more people along with us, and I feel kind of rededicated to doing more. Not just talking the good talk, but trying to walk the good walk. So along those lines, needless to say, I'll make sure that I have tons of links and ways people can find you, find Last Prisoner Project, get involved, support the organization, etc. But I think your work here has been well done. Everything that I hoped to do, but I do want to make sure you know that this is an open invitation. We should check in, and I want to hear more stories, hear how we can engage more people. But any parting words of inspiration for anyone watching right now? You've already done so much of it, but I want to give you the last word.
Um, Go to lastprisonerproject.org and go to our merch page. You can get this great shirt that Sean's wearing. That helps fund the work that we do. But don't give up. It may seem like the work is being done at a very glacial pace, but it's a lot of work put in to get one release or two releases. But the work is getting put in. And when we have bills that we're sponsoring or anything like that, uh, we have a couple. We're going to be doing some work in Virginia and Hawaii again. So Pennsylvania is another state that we're looking into. So just follow us, sign up for the newsletter so you can kind of know what's going on. Yeah, don't give up because I'm not going to. Some days are harder than others. Um, but then I look back on a Deshaun Durham or a Michael Thompson or Richard DeLisi or any of the other people that still support us to this very day and we love dearly and are glad they're out. So they're out because of the work that we do. We don't just post about it. We go in and do what needs to be done. So just hang with us.
Right on. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here. And again, I thank you for reminding me that the good work is getting done, but also that it does require support and assistance. So consider it done. Stephanie Shepard, Last Prisoner Project. Check it out, get involved. We'll see you next time on Some Things Considered. Thanks for checking us out. Tell some people about it, spread the and do not give up. Thanks for tuning in to Some Things Considered. Find out more, including how to be a guest, at seanmurphy.net. Reminder, we are obsessed with story and celebrating creativity. Also, we're here to advocate for the arts by any means necessary. Drop us a line, get involved, and support our creatives who are the lifeblood of our culture. I'm Sean Murphy. See you on the next episode of Some Things Considered.